everybody, and today I'm going to be analyzing a game between Leela and Leela on, I think, around depth 1000. And this game is definitely worth a watch. It's extremely complicated. I don't even understand it entirely. But yeah, let's just get into it. So this game was played on my machine, um, and I used a very big network, basically a brain. Like Leela had a massive brain. It didn't just calculate everything. Its network, the neural network, was really big in contrast to a lot of the other things that I have on my Leisure Studies, then I use my school computer, but in this case I use a very powerful computer to play this game. So this is a new variation that I have kind of been discovering. It is d4 knight f6, c4, g6, and h4, and c5 is, in my opinion, probably the kind of principal way to counter this opening. And the reason for this, because if white plays a move d5, then black just plays normally. Black can play d6, knight c3, e6, e4, bishop g7, bishop e2, take, knight e7, and if white ever plays the move pawn to h5, then black can always just take it. And yeah, I mean, white can go for this variation, but knight e5, and black here is actually the one who is attacking. Your king is in the center, and actually, it's not really, this idea is not really that great. This is better for black. Look at this is better for black. The main problem really is that your king is in the center of the board. You don't really have much of a safe place to go. The knight for black is really strong in the center of the board. You don't really have anything else except for, if they castle, you have mate kind of ideas. So in general, in the Benoni, playing the move h4 doesn't really work. And also, for example, in the Benoni, if let's say you go here, then usually there's the move bishop g4. Now this case probably doesn't work, but the point is that the bishop is preventing the pawn from going forward. The bishop on g5 is very well placed, and very annoying. So a move that I have been looking for is actually taking the pawn. And this move might seem pretty bad because why would you play taking? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. You're doubling on pawns, you're going to lose the pawn anyway. But actually it's very tricky. So for example, as I will show you, maybe not in this video, but in maybe another video, playing the move queen to a5 check and winning the pawn back immediately is actually not the best way to play. But knight e6 I think is the most sort of principal way to play. You want to recapture the pawn with the knight. Now you play the move h5. Again, the top position move, even at high depth, even Stockfish really likes this move, giving away a pawn. Look at that. Now I might show you, again, if you take with the pawn, I might show you in future videos how you play against that, but knight h5 was played in this game, g4, and now is where the sort of interesting turn happens. So Leela, at my sort of, worse brain or smaller, network at around 35 megabytes, really like knight f6, as well as Stockfish. Stockfish also really likes the move knight f6, but the stronger Leela with better intuition, better brain, and 10 times more storage, also 10 times bigger brain basically, plays knight g7. And I was very interested by this because I thought knight g7 was a terrible move, but it turns out it's not. Now here, it turns out actually that knight c3 is a mistake. You actually have to play the move bishop g2. But, sorry, I'll show you maybe in another video why. But knight c3, knight e6, and bishop e3 is played. So the general idea in this opening is that you want to trade off dark square bishops. So for example, if the knight here decided to go here, the main line is g5, knight h5, bishop e3, and if you go here, you have bishop d4. And you really, really want to trade off these bishops. So for example, if you take with the queen, your position is absolutely right here. You have many ideas of sacrificing the rook, you have ideas of long castling. Your position is pretty good. And maybe show you guys some games about this as well. But knight g7 kind of stops all of that because of the knight c3, the knight goes to e6, bishop e3, again with the same ideas to play bishop to d4 and trading off the dark square bishops. If you take here first, there is take and knight queen d4, so you have to be a little bit careful. So bishop g7, and now you do not want to, and this is also very nice, you do not want them to take your knight and damage the pawn structure. Now you might think that their bishop is so valuable they don't want to give it away. The problem, however, is that, as we will see in this game, black's knights are actually extremely good at defending the king. So rook c1 is played. You do not want to damage your pawn structure. Knight takes, and now b4 is played. Now you can probably see from the evaluation, sort of a spoiler for the move here, But Leela plays bishop takes c3 check. And, to someone who's never seen these types of positions before might think this is a really weird move because you're literally removing the only, like, really strong defender of the king, or mainly the stronger defender of the light squares, especially if black short castles. And that is true, but after rook to c3, you play knight e4. This is the only move. The ring moves away, and now knight f6. This is the idea. Now the pawn is hanging. Either you have to play an awkward move like bishop h3, or you play g5. Force the knight to go to h5. And this is the problem. If you go all the way back of playing h3, there's better ways to play. Because after all these moves, g5, knight h5, yes, black doesn't have a dark square bishop. Black's position, traditionally should be completely losing because you don't have a defense. The problem is white doesn't have any way to break through this solid structure. It's actually extremely difficult. You can maybe sacrifice an h5, as we will actually see in this game, but this knight could in some positions just go right back to g7. You can't open up the h file here anymore, and the position is extremely locked. You can't do anything. You might think, oh, let's go f4, f5, but they just go here. They're controlling everything. You're kind of overextended. How do you break through? Now, if you go here immediately, there's knight h3 and knight f4, and you trade off one pair of knights, and white maybe is better there. But black doesn't have to go knight g7 immediately. Okay, so black plays d6. Now the bishop is controlling the strong diagonal. Queen d2, just generally a nice improvement move. Castles, and now we're placed to move bishop to e4, which according to Leela is actually a slight mistake. What I think is very interesting, maybe knight f3 was a better move. And the idea of bishop e4 is that you want to play knight f3, but you don't want the bishop to be closed in. But apparently this was slightly better, because at an knight g7, you had this ridiculous move knight h4, and the point is that you don't allow black to play knight f5. And queen c7, c5, a very usual idea in these positions. If you take with the rook, queen b8, bishop d4, rook moves away. And here is a funny move, bishop b5, take, knight moves, take, actually take here. And we get into a position like this, where material is around equal. I think it is, yeah, white is actually down a pawn here. But white has the bishop pair, black has problems developing, but that's not really what happened in the game. So what ended up happening in the game, queen d2 and black castles, we have bishop e4 and black plays queen c7. White develops the knight and black plays rook d8. Now rook d8 might seem like a weird move, but the point is just restriction. White now cannot play c5 for obvious reasons. Black just takes and attacks the queen and you lose. So white here has really problems of coming up with a plan. And it's important to note that white is, well, is that white down a pawn actually? Let's see, 1, 2, 1, 2, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yeah. So white is actually down a pawn, and black is extremely solid. Now you might think, what is black going to do? Well, black will eventually come up with some idea. Now I plays the move a4, and I quite like this move. You're just gaining space, trying to restrict the opponent. Now, black plays the move a5. And some of you are probably thinking that white should play the move pawn to b5 here, but this is actually a mistake. You see, white, instead of that, sacrificed the rook. Look at this move, sacrificing the rook. And there's actually not a tactical reason. Oh, I guess there's a tactical reason for this, but there's actually a very long-term reason for this. Because if you play b5 immediately, after knight c5, bishop to b1, knight b3, queen c2, knight takes c1, there is no checkmate. So really the problem of playing this move is knight c5. Your bishop is attacked, you have to take, which is not a move you want to play. You do not want to give away this bishop. This bishop is way too valuable, right? This bishop is the only bishop that completely controls the dark squares. So bishop b1, knight b3, and you lose the exchange. So you have to go here. And then here. Now knight f8 is playing the game, but knight c5, bishop b1, knight b3, queen c2, and you can resign. Black can resign. Because knight takes c1, and this is checkmate, right? So you sacrifice a rook for that. Now you obviously have already seen the move here, the black plays in the game. But really, black's main problem here is the weakness on h7, and also on h5, I guess. The problem is that white, let's say, can play a move like queen to d3, and bishop takes h7. Like, how do you stop that idea? I might think, like, you can't even play h6. You have to defend it. And you kind of have to defend it with a knight. So knight f8 is played with the idea to play an h6 and just to defend the pawn. The pawn's not defending h7. And here white needs to come up with a plan. White plus knight d4. They now used to guard that square, now the knight's not. And the idea now is that this knight on d4 is going to go to f5. So the knight is really active on f5. The knight on f5 can then go, knight h6 check. So black plays knight h6. Now you cannot go here yet because they just take you, and e6. And now you don't have an attack anymore. You need to keep your knight. You do not want to give away your knight. So the next move here at white is also very, very nice. How do you basically force the move knight f5? Well, you want to go b6. Now, if they take, you can play knight b5. In this case, the queen is pretty much trapped. But if they go here, now you can play knight f5. Problem is this pawn's hanging, so you go here first. Everything is going in white's favor. You can go knight f5 next. Your position is great, right? And if you play here, the knight b5 is really, 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 really annoying. So black has to play the move queen g4. This is the only move for black to keep the advantage. Stopping knight f5. f3 check. No, it's f3, queen g3, king d2. And now, black's queen is very annoyingly placed. Again, you can play knight f5 as white, rook g1, rook h1, and black's king is a little bit weak, but there's e6 defending everything. Now there's no bishop e5, bishop f5, knight f5 ideas anymore, and black is completely solid. White ended up playing rook h1, attacking the pawn, and here is also very, very interesting, because if you play the move pawn to d5 in this position, trying to break through, this is actually the sort of intuitive move. The problem is the take, and there's queen c7, queen c7, queen takes c7, rook c7, rook d7, and now bishop d3, and rook c7, knight b5, and apparently this is more or less equal. So instead of that, black goes here in order to stop that. So white plays rook h5, but now d5 is extremely strong. Now, you don't have enough support, you might be thinking, but the point is that if you take, there's rook c8, which is really annoying. So bishop takes g3. Bishop takes g6, pawn takes g6, and rook h6. And white is actually threatening something here. White's not threatening anything, you might be thinking, but white is threatening something. Rook takes g6 check. Because if you play rook c8, there's rook g6. Look at that. So you cannot allow that. You play queen e5. Now if you played rook g6, there's pawn takes g6, and queen g7. That doesn't work. So white plays f4, attacking the queen. Queen moves back to g7. You can also play queen e4. It's basically the same. And now c5, locking down everything. There's, white basically says there's no counterplay. I'm going to play knight f3 next, and all your pawns are blockaded. But you play e5. Your pawns are not blockaded. If you take with the queen, your pawn's weak. You have many weak squares around your king, and you have no pawn play. So you play knight f3. One of the other ideas of playing the move e5 was to play bishop f5, and this is ridiculous how like dynamic all these things are. Like boom, boom, boom. Right now the queen's attack. The queen moves to c3 for some reason, which looks like a blunder because you're blundering a fork, but there's a miraculous check, and the engine doesn't really like this endgame. So instead we have queen d7, pawn takes e5, queen takes c4, and black is pretty much winning because of his outside passed pawn on a5, as well as obviously his extra exchange. Now white attacks queen, black blocks with the pawn, rook takes d4, rook takes d4, knight takes d4, attacking the bishop moves away, now pawn to a6. Now maybe black had to play some rook d8 instead, pinning the piece, and then after king e1 played queen b4. Maybe this was slightly more accurate. Bishop e4 is maybe a slight inaccuracy because now white can kind of push his pawn. Black now plays rook e8, attacking the pawn to kind of pressure me the pawn. Black moves the king away, and now bishop d5, the only kind of idea in the position. You have to win the pawn. If white loses that pawn, white has no ideas. And if white has no ideas, then white probably loses. So c6, c6 is played. The c6 square is controlled many, many times, so it's a completely sound idea. Pawn takes c6, and now bishop to f4. Now the bishop is controlling the promotion square. And it's really difficult for black to play here. Now b7 is a massive threat. So black plays queen a2, stopping b7 because of queen b1 check, forking the pieces. So you go queen c1, and like look at these moves. Boom, boom. Queen c1, stopping queen b1 check, which would be a fork. Now the next three moves are pretty obvious, I think. Black plays bishop c4, threatening checkmate in one. Not threatening anything actually, but there's b7, c5, b8 queen, rook takes, bishop takes, take, and here the only defensive move is queen d1. If you play queen d2, there's a fork. So queen d1 is played, and everything is really solid. White is very well defending here. And here, I really like this next move by Leela. This is a move this is like a very instructive moment. What do you play here with black? Now, everything is draw, like, technically speaking. Some of you are probably suggesting just to push the pawn, but there's bishop b5, and just take. And this position is not winnable for black. Never. The way that you win the split black is to win the pawn on e6. How do you win the pawn on e6? Well, you might think, I'll just get to take it, and then push the pawn. But the problem is, again, they just take, and you don't have anything. So, you play bishop b5. And after here, you go a4, okay, take, and now here. And this queen is completely restricted, and the queen and bishop are still attacking the checkmate. I really like this idea, by the way. Bishop b5, here and here. And the idea of bishop b5 was to bring the queen there, right? But because the queen here on a2 is not really that well placed, so you move the bishop away in order to bring the queen in. Really nasty stuff. So queen d2, a3, bishop c4 attacking the pawn, and then you gave a check, bishop was back, and now bishop d4. And this position is completely unwinnable for black. Everything is like completely defended, and this game did end in a draw after many, many moves. So black just doesn't really have much to do. Black plays king g8 out of all legal moves. Queen b8, bishop blocks, queen c7. You can't really make progress. The problem here is opposite colored bishops, which are usually very much drawn. This is one of those examples where black just cannot really do anything. Because if you ever make a queen, then the bishop just takes. So what ends up happening is there's a lot of checks happening. White eventually wins the pawn, and we go into this endgame. But eventually white just ended up checking forever, and we got a triple representation, and the game ended in a draw. So the thing about this game is that black was the one who was forcing all the moves. Black was the one who was kind of crushing, and white was kind of forced to sacrifice an exchange in this position. Because if you play b5 and ac5, it's really annoying. You have to give away this bishop. If you don't want to give away the exchange, you're going to get into this position. Now black's going to, black can develop the pieces, black can play bishop b6, and black is completely fine. So, really nice game here, and it's really nice how everything Leela makes, for some reason, has just a flow through it. Everything just fits perfectly together, instead of something like Stockfish, which is like, it doesn't know the sort of whole thing of the game of chess. It doesn't see like an idea. It's just like, this is the best move because of all the calculations that are done. So it turns out actually here, I think in this position, knight c3 is actually a mistake. Knight c3 is a mistake. You had to play bishop g2, knight c3, and some other move. Yeah, you had to play bishop d2, and then bishop c3. This was the way for white to get an advantage, apparently. Now, the engine still doesn't say this is an advantage. It doesn't really matter. The point is, this is the way you play. Bishop d2 and bishop c3. That is the most instructive idea that I've ever seen from Leela. It's so easy. Yet, it's extremely difficult for Stockfish, for example, to see it. Because it thinks, oh, let's just develop my knight. Or, oh, let's just develop my knight. But bishop d2, look at this, now it actually sees it. Bishop d2 is the only move. Bishop d2, bishop g7, and bishop c3. With the same idea as before, but now you're basically forcefully trading off the bishops. Knight takes c5, here, a6, bishop g7, knight g7, queen d4, attacking the knight, king f8, and c5. Kind of restricting everything. White is clearly better here. You cannot play b6, the bishop is strong, and black doesn't have the same type of activity as we saw in the other position. Black doesn't have knight e6, for example, in this position, because rook would be hanging with checkmate, might I add. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. There's many different complications that I haven't went in through. It was a very, very messy game. But hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you guys later. Bye.